I feel like it happens every single year. But the Gophers football team is being underrated. It has been underrated throughout the whole college football playoff era. Yes, they could do more, but I'm going to tell you why you should give them a little more respect. Plus, Cam Christie is in the NBA.
Hey, you are Locked On Golden Gophers.
No matter what we're going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
Your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
However it turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
What's up, Gopher fans? You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. But during the off season, we got it a little bit switched up, 3 days a week. Those days have been a little bit more sporadic with the work schedule for your boy, but we are making sure to get some content out there for you. So we will be doing a show every day for the rest of the month of June to make sure we catch up. But overall, we're talking about Minnesota being constantly underrated for football, especially in this college football playoff era. Then we're going to talk about Cam Christie, where he landed in the NBA draft and what it means for him in the long term. And finally, we're going to talk about Gophers basketball and if they can keep on improving on the trajectory we saw last season. All that and more here at Locked On Golden Gophers. Now, we've got a little bit of a different camera today. I had to pack up the other camera for an event I have to shoot later this evening, so bear with me if this one isn't as nice looking, but hopefully it will get the job done. Now, let's dive into that football talk first, because Minnesota is constantly being underrated in the college football playoff era. Plain and simple, because when you look at the wins, which has been circulating over on X, Twitter, whatever we're calling it these days, when you look at the wins that have happened in the college football playoff era, Minnesota is 27th in the entire nation of 130 plus teams in FBS football. Minnesota is 27th in college football playoff era wins. Now, things we hear far too often being Gopher fans: the Gophers are second tier. The Gophers aren't successful. PJ Fleck is overrated. Minnesota is in the lower half, or they are a lower half team in the Big Ten. But if you look at the wins over the course of the college football playoff era, which extends to 2014, which has been a vast majority of PJ Fleck's time here with the Gophers, what you will see is that Minnesota isn't a lower half team. They aren't extremely overrated. They aren't a second tier when it comes to, okay, yes, second tier because behind Ohio State, Michigan, but that's everybody in the entire conference. But when it comes to beyond those 2-3 schools with the power schools in the Big Ten, Minnesota should be in the conversation with some of those others. They might not be at the tip top of their tier, but they should be in that tier with a Wisconsin, with Iowa, with who else is in that tier right now? Maybe Northwestern, depending on some of the years. I mean, they won the division a couple times, but then they also had a 1 win and a 3-win season. Maybe we shouldn't put them in that conversation, but what I'm saying is Minnesota deserves a bit more respect, because if, much to the chagrin of rivals, of haters, and even of the negative Minnesota fans, and you know we have a whole bunch of those in any Minnesota sport you talk about, Vikings, Timberwolves, Wild, Gophers, you name it, you have those negative Minnesota sports fans that just always, oh, but this, oh, but they didn't win the championship, oh, but even though they went to the Western Conference Finals, they're not good enough, trade the team, break it up, blah, blah. Like, you always have those folks. And in my humble opinion, why are you even a fan of the sports in general? It seems like they cause you more grief than they do enjoyment, than they do being a true engaged fan and hopeful and looking for the positivity that sports bring. But I digress. We're going down a rabbit hole on that one. Minnesota is actually right on the verge of a top 25 team in wins during the college football playoff era. Now, recently, like I said, a list surfaced on the good old Twitter, and it named the top 50 programs with the most wins in the college football playoff era, and Minnesota finished 27th on the list in terms of all teams in the nation. Minnesota had 74 wins within the CFP era, which began in 2014. Now, teams just barely above Minnesota include Texas A&M with 76 wins, Houston with 76 wins, Kansas State, Florida, both 76 wins, BYU, 78 wins, North Carolina State, 78 wins. Now, those teams have 2 to 4 more wins than the Gophers, but every one of those schools I just named has played more games in the 2020 season, up to 4+ more games. Minnesota only played 7 games in that season. Most of those teams played a full season of 12 games. Maybe one game got canceled here or there, so they had 11 games. That difference, 4 to 5 to 6 games of difference, that can be make or break for Minnesota being in that top 25 and in maybe even the top 20 when it comes to wins in the college football playoff era. So overall, Minnesota is right there in the pack, and I think that they don't get enough credit. They don't get enough love, because when you're talking about teams that are below them in the wins, teams who finished with less wins than Minnesota, Texas, Miami, Ole Miss, Auburn, Michigan State, Tennessee, those are programs that always will get more love than Minnesota. And I'm not saying that they are the same caliber each and every year, but what I'm saying is that we're constantly overlooking or being overlooked when it comes to football. And I think things have been changing in the right direction. Now, yes, they still got to get some more done. They still got to put themselves in another conversation when it comes to winning bigger games, when it comes to beating ranked opponents. That's what's going to help Minnesota get more national media respect. But right now, I still think they are being overlooked. Like I said, even with the shortened season, Minnesota finds itself in the top 30 and could quite possibly have been in the top 20 with a full 2020 season, or if Minnesota could have held on to a couple games that they had no business losing. And that's Minnesota's own fault in that one. I will give it to you. Minnesota, the Bowling Green game should have been a dub. Illinois last year should have been a dub. Purdue 2 years ago should have been a dub. Northwestern last year should have been a dub. That gets you to 78 right there, even with the shortened season. So if Minnesota takes care of its own business, it would find itself in that top 20 on its own. But regardless, being a top 30 program in the college football playoff era, it doesn't. I bet you a lot of folks were shocked to see 74 wins and 27th in the country on that list for Minnesota. So I don't want to hear all the hate for Minnesota or the sleeping on Minnesota. Yes, they might not have won the West Division, but damn, they were right there in 2019, 2021, 2022. And if not for a silly game in each of those seasons, the Gophers would have been in that championship game for the Big Ten. So the Gophers have done far more winning than what Minnesotans are used to in this college football landscape. Minnesota hasn't done this type of winning, but they are getting on the right track. Now, last year was a rough year. It was a down year. But if they can come back and answer the call, if they can come back and put it together and get 7+ wins, 8+ wins on this next season, then it's time to put more respect on this program and their namesake moving forward. Now, we're hoping for even more. It's not enough. We still want to see more wins. We want to see that next level of bowl game. We want to be in the higher tier caliber. We want to get to a college football playoff now that it has expanded. But with the schedule this year that some seem to be shaking in their boots over, Minnesota could still find success. And we've talked about that on the show and what this schedule looks like for the Gophers moving forward. I think they can have a positive year, and it shouldn't shock folks. Now, if you look at FanDuel Sportsbook or other sportsbooks out there, that it would shock you for Minnesota to have a successful season, but they can truly have one, and it shouldn't be baffling. Now, unfortunately, looking across the landscape, our rivals came in at tied for 8th with Wisconsin 90 wins, tied for 12th with Iowa and 88 wins. They finished well ahead of us, but still the progress should be noticed. Now, of the old Big Ten, Ohio State was in 1st, Michigan was in 2nd, Wisconsin 3rd, Iowa 4th, tied for 4th with Penn State, and then Minnesota coming in at 6th. So overall, with the newer teams added into the Big Ten, Minnesota actually would have finished 9th in the Big Ten. Oregon would have tied Wisconsin at 3rd. Washington would have been 7th. And then it would have been Minnesota because I believe Washington would have been just below Iowa and Penn State. Oh, and then USC would have been 8th at 79 wins. Now, that still puts Minnesota in the top half of the conference, the top 9 of the conference of 18 teams. So I think Minnesota could fight to stay right in that range of the 7th to 9th range in the Big Ten Conference, which is the upper half of the conference. And in the good years, in the great years, in the years where you really get a good class put together with high caliber talent, some good transfer portals, and you get a handful of those every so often. In Minnesota's best years, that's where they could maybe push themselves into a 4th in a college football playoff spot or something of the sort. So that is what Gophers fans want to see from Minnesota as they continue to progress. Now, Minnesota, like I said, finished ahead of teams like Texas, Miami, Ole Miss, Auburn, Michigan State, and Tennessee, and that should be impressive in its own right. The truth is Minnesota has been rising, but they also need to keep proving it to earn any national respect. But it is time to recognize and show a little bit of love, even with the seasons that have 1 or 2 regrettable losses in each of the last 5 years. Minnesota is trending upwards, and hopefully they'll get back on track this upcoming season. Now, coming up next, we're going to talk about the latest Gopher to be drafted in the NBA. That's Cam Christie. Where'd he land and how is he fit with that team? We're jumping into it coming up next. First, we got to talk about our friends over at eBay Motors because they have you covered when it comes to all things for your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your ride or die, your vehicle, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And they've got you covered in every aspect, whether you're into speed, power, or style. eBay Motors has you covered, and they have you covered with the less worries, with the less hassles, because the eBay Guaranteed Fit is there, and your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. So definitely give them a look. They have everything from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. And they will help you maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. So definitely give them a look over at ebaymotors.com and keep your ride or die alive. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and the eBay Guaranteed Fit is for U.S. customers only. All right, Gophers fans, let's talk about Cam Christie, who was drafted in the NBA draft, the 2nd round in yesterday's final portion of this year's 2024 NBA draft. It was different to see it have 2 different days, but you know what? It was cool to not have it drag on till midnight. It was cool to have a little bit of a different atmosphere around it all. And that second day started a little earlier, so it didn't go as late. But Cam Christie did wait a little bit longer than what I had anticipated. I thought he would be in that 26 to 40 range. He ends up falling a bit beyond that to pick 46, where he was ultimately drafted by the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, not 1, but 2 Christies will be in LA, just on separate teams. Cam Christie follows the same path that his brother Max Christie did and is selected in the 2nd round of the draft at pick 46 to the LA Clippers, their only selection in the entire NBA draft. So that speaks to the upside that they see with a Cam Christie. Now, his brother Max Christie was selected in the 2nd round 2 years ago with pick 35 with the LA Lakers, and he started seeing time last year for the first time with the Lakers and showing that upside in spurts. Now, prior to that, he spent his rookie season in the G League, came over in year 2 and got some sporadic minutes, got into the rotation a little bit, and they have a lot of potential interest in his upside moving forward with the Lakers. I think that is a similar path we could see with Cam Christie and the Clippers. It might take more than 1 year in the G League. Maybe it takes 2, but Cam Christie finds himself in a spot that could be promising in the long term. Now, the pick is looking like a long term, like I said, because he likely won't see the floor for at least a year, maybe longer. Now, he will definitely be in development mode for at least a year or 2, but it could be promising landing spot because right now the Los Angeles Clippers core includes a 9-player core rotation. Last year, these 9 players saw 15 minutes or more. The number 1 player in minutes last year for the Clippers was James Harden with 40 minutes a game, Paul George with 37 minutes a game, Zubac at the center for 32 minutes a game, Terrence Mann 32 minutes a game, Norman Powell 30 minutes a game, Kawhi Leonard 30 minutes a game, Russell Westbrook 20 minutes a game, Amir Coffey, Gopher, 18 minutes a game, and PJ Tucker, 15 minutes per game. That was their core. But in that core, you have PJ Tucker, age 35, Russell Westbrook, age 35, Paul George, age 34, James Harden, age 34, Kawhi Leonard, age 32, and Norman Powell, age 31. That is a significantly older core for an NBA team. And even their younger core members in that rotation aren't necessarily young, so to speak, when it comes to NBA age. Zubac, Mann, and Coffey all being age 27. Now, they still have a vast majority of their careers in front of them. They're just getting into maybe their peaks of their career, but all those other players definitely on the backside of their careers, getting older, still very talented, still all-star caliber players in a Paul George, in a James Harden, in a Kawhi Leonard. But that tells you that older core, it means if they don't get it done in these next couple of years, it's probably going to be time to blow it up and get a new focus in a direction for your program. And with that could see Cam Christie stepping into a bigger role, a bigger opportunity in major minutes, especially if he ends up developing in that G League system. So this team is aging out. Plus, you've got Paul George, who not necessarily might not be staying with this team next year. He might be looking for a sign and trade to get out of that Los Angeles Clippers franchise. On top of that, James Harden said he won't sign another contract with the Clippers until he knows what is happening with Paul George. So this offseason, they could lose two of those older core members. And if that happens, if those two are moving on, you can imagine Russell Westbrook, PJ Tucker, both age 34 and 35, could follow soon after as well. That's 4 of that core of 9 already maybe leaving and on the outs within this offseason or next year. If that core doesn't lock in, you will see Cam Christie get some more opportunities potentially with this Clippers team in a year or two at tops. Now, if that core does lock back in for another 2 years, then you're looking at one last run before turning over a new leaf. But regardless, being in that age 34 to 36 window for a vast majority of those players, it means that they won't be together too much longer. So in the end, Cam Christie becomes a foundational piece for the future. Yes, he is a second-round pick, but second-round picks still have value, especially in this new financial space for the NBA where every contract is going to matter. And if you can find someone on a cheaper deal that can bring you success and bring you minutes, say Cam Christie doesn't get on the floor for 2 years, but then he gets in there and he shows well to be a rotational guy, and you can pay him a 4-year extension and have him at a reasonable contract so you can start to find those bigger star pieces to place around him and have him be a complimentary guy. That could be positive for Cam Christie in building up his career, but also helping that cash flexibility with the Clippers organization. Now, maybe Cam Christie absolutely balls out and turns into one of those star players. Well, that will be beneficial, but also see his promise in the long run as well. So he can be a building block and a foundational piece for this Clippers team moving forward. But overall, he is definitely going to need to develop for a year or two. But once those older players start being shipped out, it may be time for Cam Christie. He's definitely the youngest player in this team by almost around 5 years. You've still got younger guys like Bones Highland on the roster, Brandon Bostic Jr. on the roster, and he's still almost 4, 5, sometimes 3 years younger than all of those players, being only 18 years old, won't turn 19 till the end of the July month. So overall, I'm intrigued by the fit. I wish he would have went a little bit higher just for our Gophers fandom's sake, but overall, I am proud to have him headed to the NBA. Another fun thing is that there are now both of the active Gophers players in the NBA on the same roster. So shout out to the Clippers, the Minnesota Gophers team, of the NBA, I guess. So much love from the Clippers giving these Gophers a chance. Hopefully Cam Christie gets the opportunity down the line, and we see that promise just like we're seeing from his brother with the Lakers, but time will tell. Now, to close out today's show, I want to talk about the men's basketball team and the huge improvement we saw from 2023 to 24. How big was that improvement, and can they keep it up moving forward? That's what's coming up next. First, let's talk to you about FanDuel because, look, I love sports, you love sports, but I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as these playoffs are winding down, NBA is done now. The NHL is done now. We get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I would like them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. We can start talking about 2025, whether it be college football, college basketball, NBA, NFL, you name it. You can dream it up over at FanDuel, and they have you covered. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all of its customers, not just first-time customers, all of them, with a boost or a bonus on the daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to fanduel.com/lockedon and make the most of your summer with FanDuel. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball, which is alive and kicking, but also FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Locked On. All right, Gophers fans, let's talk about the improvement from last year's men's basketball team, and can that trajectory continue? Because when you're looking at last year in comparison to 2023, the Gophers improved by a 10-game margin. Now that's massive. They went from 9 wins to 19 wins, but you can still make a bigger jump next season. You can still hopefully get yourself into the 20-win surge. And if they made another 10-game improvement, that'd be 29 wins. That would be massively impressive. I don't see that happening for the Gophers, but can they still keep the trajectory going upwards? Speaking of growth, you're heading in the right direction with Cam Christie was a big member of the Gophers team, now in the NBA. Ben Johnson and the coaching has been showing progress year to year and showing growth and showing foundation and moving improvement in 10 games from 23 to 24. But this was tied for the 6th biggest improvement in the nation of over 300 teams in Division I college basketball. The Gophers were tied for the 6th best improvement of all those teams. They were tied for the 3rd best improvement among high major and power conference teams, and they were first best. The first best of the high major and power conference teams was South Carolina. Former Gophers Talon Cooper with that South Carolina team ended up winning 15 more games than the previous year. Now, second in that high major was University of North Carolina with an 11-win increase, which is impressive because it's not like North Carolina was a bad team the year prior. I believe they were on the cusp of the tournament or just bubbled into the tournament that year prior, but they still found ways to find success, and then they massively found success last year. Then you have Minnesota, SMU, Iowa State, and Cal all tied for the 3rd highest jump among those power conference teams with 10 more major wins. Now, the greatest of all the D1 teams, including the low major teams, was McNeese with 19 more wins in their jump. But the biggest question for Minnesota becomes, can they sustain that type of success and then still improve upon it? Because looking at the potential returnees last year, Minnesota fans, coaches, other opposing coaches in the conference thought Minnesota was not only bound for more success, but to bloom further and likely improve. And as many of you know, we anticipated Dawson Garcia back, Cam Christie back, Parker Fox back, Mike Mitchell Jr. back, Elijah Hawkins back, Pharrell Payne back, Braden Carrington back, and Caden Betts back. We were on the fence of if Joshua Joseph would come back, but that one seemed like he was maybe headed to the portal. Now, of that is a core of 8 players possibly returning, and that could have been massive for Minnesota. But as you know, as I know, as it hurt and cut deep, drastic change left us with only 4 of those 8 returning. But that is still quite a difference, especially when one of those was someone who didn't receive much playing time. So you have really 3 core players of the 7 or 8 you were anticipating back and playing with you this upcoming season, and those 3 are all seniors, all 1 year of eligibility left. Now, you still are thankful for that, but the Gophers had drastic changes that were necessary for this roster, and Minnesota did end up bringing a lot of experience back through 6 players in the portal, 5 of them being 1 year seniors left, and then 1 of them having an additional extra year of eligibility in Frank Mitchell Jr., who should be with the Gophers hopefully for the next 2 seasons. But the real question becomes, can they put it all together, and can they do it quickly in a one and only prove it year for a lot of these players? Lukai Patterson, tons of upside. Femi Odikale, tons of upside. Both of those players could be starters for this Gophers team moving forward. Of these transfers, I believe 2 or 3 of them will start because I think Mike Mitchell Jr. is going to be a starter. I think Dawson Garcia is going to be a starter, but who starts alongside them? Could Parker Fox find his way into the starting lineup? He could, but I think what he brings to this team, the energy he brings, the level of excitement, a spark off the bench, I think that is valued, and I think he could be the 6th man on this roster. If that's the case, then you're looking at 2 starters from last year returning, but then 3 new starters. Now, like I said, I think Femi Odikale, I think Frank Mitchell, and I think Lukai Patterson fit into those starting type roles. And then if that's how it plays out, you're looking at that starting lineup plus a bench of Parker Fox being your 6-man rotation. But who are the 2 to 3 other players that Ben Johnson inserts into that rotation beyond them? Is it the center and Trey Edmonds? Is it the McAllister spark plug fiery scorer from Caleb Williams? Is it Brennan Rigsby coming from Oregon who can hit the 3? Is it Caden Betts starting into a new, bigger role who's been with the team now for 2 years? Or is it true freshman Isaac Asuma finding a role? If Minnesota wants to continue that upward trend, and the developed chemistry in a heartbeat is going to be critical. You have to find a way to really hone in on that relationship building, chemistry building, team building over this summer and let it click. Now, having a ton of experienced players sometimes can help that generate faster because they understand what it takes to play at this level. But also, it's hard to get that chemistry, that bond, and that understanding of each other and working through the rough patches super, super fast when you haven't played with a lot of these guys before. So Minnesota's big success in potentially recruiting moving forward and getting to a tournament this year and sparking the success and seeing Ben Johnson remain with the team relies on a ton of seniors coming together fast and continuing to improve and find themselves into the tournament. Is it impossible? No, but it will be a tough task. Now, like I said, for long-term success, looking at that bench rotation, I think it's pertinent to get Caden Betts, Isaac Asuma, and Frank Mitchell key minutes in this season, 15-plus minutes, 20-plus minutes for those guys in order to hopefully have some impact carry over into 2025. But we know Mike Mitchell Jr., Dawson Garcia, Parker Fox, Lukai Patterson, and Femi Odikale, those guys are probably going to see a lot of minutes, but hopefully we can get some of the guys that will be back for the year after also getting minutes, impact minutes, so Ben Johnson and crew aren't starting from scratch every single year. Now, I believe Minnesota will have the talent to win more games than they did last year next season, but it will come down to truly how much and how quickly this team can gel. I want to know your thoughts on this basketball team, what you're liking, what you're disliking, what you're worried about, and more down in the comments on YouTube. But I will talk a little more Gophers basketball this weekend. We will also do some football talk, so be sure to hit subscribe. We're going to dive into some talks every day of this weekend, and we'll have one bright and early for you on July 1st as well. Hit subscribe over on YouTube. This is Locked On Golden Gophers. Until next time, roll the boat, Sky Uma, go Gophers as always, and don't forget to hit subscribe.